The cold, fluorescent lights of the Chicago metro station flickered overhead as Kate Mitchell hurried toward the last train of the night. The city was unusually quiet, and her footsteps echoed in the empty corridor, amplifying the feeling of isolation. She clutched her bag tightly, her anxiety simmering just beneath the surface. It wasn't the kind of nervousness that faded with deep breaths. It was the kind that stuck, gnawed at the edges of her mind, and never truly let go. For months, Kate had felt this way, restless, uneasy, and constantly on edge. She told herself it was work stress. After all, her job as a claims analyst at a high-pressure insurance firm demanded precision and late nights, leaving little time for her to unwind. But deep down, Kate knew better. The feeling of being watched, of something lurking just out of sight, had grown stronger every day. At first, it was easy to brush off the small things. A misplaced set of keys, her phone dying overnight despite being fully charged, and the occasional shadow flickering in her peripheral vision. She chalked it up to exhaustion until the emails began. The first one had arrived 2 months ago with a cryptic subject line, "We know what you've done." Confused, Kate opened it. The body of the message was blank. Thinking it was spam, she deleted it without a second thought. But the emails kept coming, each one more unnerving than the last. Some contained photos of her, walking home, sitting at her desk at work, even staring out of her apartment window. Others included fragments of her online activity, like a list of her recent Google searches or timestamps from private conversations she'd had over the phone. The most chilling one arrived last week, a distorted audio file of her own voice whispering, "You can't run forever." Kate had no memory of recording those words. Sitting alone in the train car, she felt her phone buzz again. The screen lit up with another email notification. She hesitated before opening it. Subject, "Why are you so anxious?" Message, "We're closer than you think." Her hands trembled. For a moment she considered calling the police, but she knew what they'd say. "We can't do much unless there's a direct threat." She had tried reporting the emails before and was met with empty promises to look into it. The fear had followed her home that night, clinging like smoke. The small studio apartment that once felt cozy now seemed suffocating, its dim lighting casting long shadows against the walls. Kate double-checked the locks on her doors and windows, but no amount of security measures could shake the sense that she was being watched. Her unease was rooted in something deeper. A year ago, Kate's younger sister Anna had vanished. It was supposed to be a routine road trip through the Midwest, but Anna's car was found abandoned on a desolate stretch of highway in Kansas. No note, no sign of struggle, just an empty vehicle and a phone with its data wiped clean. The police called it a missing person case and moved on, but Kate couldn't. She spent months scouring forums, interviewing locals, and retracing Anna's route. Every lead turned into a dead end until she found an obscure online thread. Other women had disappeared under similar circumstances, each case tied to a single word scrawled nearby: penance. That word haunted Kate. She didn't understand what it meant, but she knew it was the key to finding Anna. Her only ally in this search was Ben Carter, a childhood friend turned investigative journalist. Ben's knack for uncovering hidden truths made him invaluable, and his access to underground tech resources opened doors that Kate couldn't reach alone. Together, they started connecting the dots. The more they uncovered, the more sinister the picture became. A shadowy organization seemed to be orchestrating these disappearances, targeting young women with no clear motive. The victims' social media accounts were wiped, their bank records erased, and their names removed from official databases. It was as if they had never existed. Kate's resolve hardened. This wasn't just about finding Anna anymore. It was about uncovering the truth and exposing whoever was behind these disappearances. As the train screeched to a halt at her stop, Kate stepped out into the chilly Chicago night. The streets were eerily quiet, and every shadow seemed to move with intent. She pulled her coat tighter around her and walked briskly toward her apartment. She didn't notice the black sedan idling across the street. Inside the car, a figure watched her through the tinted window, a faint smile curling their lips. "Soon," they murmured, tapping a finger against a folder labeled with a single word: penance. Kate didn't sleep much anymore. She sat at her small desk in her apartment, surrounded by stacks of printouts, maps, and handwritten notes pinned to a corkboard on the wall. Each piece of paper was a thread in a web she couldn't quite untangle. Missing persons reports, strange symbols scrawled on abandoned properties, and the cryptic word penance appeared again and again. Her apartment had become a war room, a space where she sifted through every clue in her relentless search for Anna. But the deeper she dug, the darker the picture became. One night, Ben arrived with his laptop and a grim expression. He was her lifeline in this investigation, someone with access to resources she didn't have. Ben worked as a freelance journalist and had spent years uncovering corporate corruption. If anyone could help Kate find Anna, it was him. "I found something," Ben said, setting his laptop on the cluttered table. Kate leaned forward, her heart racing. "What is it?" Ben opened a folder containing files he had retrieved through a contact on the dark web. "Eterna Labs," he said. The name sent a chill down Kate's spine. She had come across it in her research. A pharmaceutical company with a long history of lawsuits and accusations of unethical practices. "Why does that name keep popping up?" Kate asked. Ben scrolled through the documents, his brow furrowed. "Because they're involved in something bigger than we imagined. Look at this." He pulled up a series of files labeled Penance Protocols. The documents described experimental procedures aimed at manipulating memory and personality. They detailed invasive methods to erase traumatic memories or implant new ones, with the goal of creating restructured individuals. The language was clinical, detached, and horrifying. "They're treating people like lab rats," Ben muttered, disgusted. Kate's hands trembled as she read the files. One name jumped out at her: Anna Mitchell. Her breath hitched. They have her. The file listed Anna as a test subject in an ongoing experiment, with a location noted as a testing site on the outskirts of Chicago. The facility was described as abandoned, but the timestamp on Anna's file was recent. "That's where they're keeping her," Kate said, her voice trembling but resolute. Ben hesitated. "Kate, this could be a trap. If they know you're looking, they already know." Kate interrupted, recalling the emails and the photos of her. "They've been watching me this whole time. But if there's even a chance Anna's still alive, I have to go." Ben sighed. "Then we need a plan." Over the next few days, they prepared. Ben used his contacts to gather equipment, a crowbar, flashlights, and burner phones. He also hacked into the building's blueprints to identify potential entry and exit points. "You sure about this?" Ben asked on the night of their mission. Kate nodded, determination in her eyes. "I'm not leaving without her." The warehouse stood on the outskirts of the city, a hulking structure surrounded by chain-link fences and overgrown weeds. The building was a relic of Chicago's industrial past, its windows shattered and its walls streaked with rust. Kate and Ben slipped through a gap in the fence, their breath visible in the freezing air. The place was silent, except for the distant hum of passing traffic. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and mildew. Rows of makeshift cells lined the walls, some filled with medical equipment, others bearing strange symbols scrawled in faded red paint. Kate felt a shiver run down her spine as she ran her flashlight over the symbols, swirls and jagged lines that seemed almost alive in the flickering light. "This place feels wrong," Ben whispered, his voice barely audible. Kate didn't respond. Her flashlight beam landed on a small object in one of the cells, a torn bracelet. She recognized it immediately. It was Anna's. "She's here," Kate said, her heart pounding. The faint hum of machinery grew louder as they ventured deeper into the building. The walls were lined with wires leading to a central chamber where a dull blue light pulsed rhythmically. Before they could reach the source, alarms blared. The sudden noise shattered the silence, and red lights flooded the corridors. "We've got company," Ben muttered, gripping the crowbar tightly. Kate's pulse thundered as they ducked into a side room. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway, accompanied by the crackle of radios. "Secure the perimeter," a voice commanded, cold and authoritative. Kate peeked through the doorway, her heart racing. 4 men in tactical gear moved methodically down the hall, their weapons raised. "We're trapped," she whispered. "Not yet," Ben replied, his jaw set. "Follow me." He led Kate through a maze of hallways, keeping just ahead of their pursuers. They reached a locked door, and Ben worked quickly to pick the lock while Kate kept watch. "Hurry," she urged, her hands trembling. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with monitors and medical equipment. In the center of the room was a chair surrounded by wires and screens, and there, strapped to the chair, was Anna. "Anna!" Kate cried, rushing to her sister's side. Anna's eyes were open but vacant, her body limp. Electrodes were attached to her temples, and the machine beside her pulsed with light. Before Kate could free her, the door burst open, and the men in tactical gear stormed in. "Step away from the subject," one of them commanded, his voice cold and mechanical. Kate stood her ground, shielding Anna with her body. "You're not taking her!" The room descended into chaos as Ben fought to disable the machine, and Kate refused to back down. The air in the chamber was thick with tension as Kate stood in front of Anna, shielding her from the advancing operatives. The red lights pulsed in time with the machine's ominous hum, casting an eerie glow over the room. "Step away from her!" barked one of the men, his weapon trained on Kate. "Not a chance!" Kate snapped, her voice trembling but resolute. Ben was already at the machine, frantically examining the cables and screens. "This thing is way more advanced than I thought," he muttered under his breath. "It's some kind of neurological interface. If I pull the wrong wire, it could fry her brain." "Do it fast," Kate hissed, her eyes darting between Anna and the men closing in on them. The lead operative signaled to the others, who began to spread out, trying to flank Kate and Ben. She clenched her fists, her mind racing. There was no way out, but she wasn't leaving Anna behind. "Listen to me," the operative said, his tone calm but menacing. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. This procedure is for her own good. If you stop it now, you'll destroy her." Kate's chest tightened. "You're lying. You've been lying this whole time." The man took a step closer, his shadow falling over Anna's limp form. "What do you think will happen if you unplug her? She's already too far gone. Her memories, her identity, they're fragments now. All you'll have is an empty shell." "Kate," Ben interrupted, his voice sharp. "I think I can shut this thing down, but you need to buy me time." Kate didn't hesitate. She grabbed the nearest object, a metal tray, and hurled it at the operative. The distraction gave her just enough time to dive for one of the makeshift barriers in the room. The operative sprang into action. One lunged toward Ben, who swung a crowbar with all his strength, knocking the man off balance. Another fired a warning shot, the bullet ricocheting off the metal frame of the machine. Kate ducked behind the barrier, her heart pounding as she searched for anything to use as a weapon. Her eyes landed on a discarded fire extinguisher in the corner. Grabbing it, she swung it toward the nearest operative, the heavy canister connecting with his ribs. "Stay down," she shouted, adrenaline surging through her veins. Meanwhile, Ben yanked at a cluster of wires, causing the machine to sputter and whine. Sparks flew, and the blue light that had bathed Anna began to flicker. "Almost there," Ben yelled, sweat dripping from his forehead. Anna's body convulsed as the machine malfunctioned, her head jerking to the side. Kate's stomach turned at the sight, but she forced herself to focus. The operatives regrouped, their leader barking orders. "Take them alive if possible. We need the girl intact." Kate's grip tightened on the fire extinguisher as she stepped between Anna and the approaching men. "You're not taking her anywhere." One of the operatives lunged at her, and they grappled. He was stronger, but Kate fought with everything she had, kicking and twisting until she broke free. Ben seized the opportunity to smash the control panel with the crowbar, sending the machine into a frenzy. The room was chaos. Alarms blared, the red lights strobed, and the operatives scrambled to regain control. "Kate, we have to go!" Ben shouted as smoke began to fill the room. Kate turned to Anna, her heart breaking at the sight of her sister's pale, motionless face. "I'm not leaving without her." With a final desperate effort, Ben disconnected the last of the cables and the machine powered down. Anna's body went still, her breathing shallow but steady. "Help me carry her," Kate yelled, grabbing Anna under her arms. Ben dropped the crowbar and rushed to lift Anna's legs. Together, they maneuvered her out of the chair and toward the door. The operatives were still recovering, coughing and disoriented from the smoke and sparks. Kate and Ben pushed past them, adrenaline fueling their escape. The corridors of the warehouse were a maze, but Kate had memorized the layout from Ben's blueprints. They sprinted toward the exit, Anna's limp body weighing them down. Behind them, the sound of footsteps grew louder. "They're gaining on us!" Ben panted, his voice strained. Kate glanced over her shoulder and saw the operatives closing in. Her mind raced. "This way," she shouted, leading them into a side corridor. They burst through a back door into the freezing night. The air was crisp and biting, but it felt like freedom. Kate spotted their car parked a few yards away and motioned for Ben to hurry. "Get her in the back seat," she ordered, yanking the door open. Ben carefully placed Anna inside, then jumped into the driver's seat. Kate barely had time to climb in before the engine roared to life. As they sped away, headlights appeared in the distance. The operatives were in pursuit, their black SUVs closing the gap. "Hold on!" Ben shouted, swerving onto a narrow side road. The chase was harrowing. Ben maneuvered the car through tight turns and narrow alleys, but the SUVs were relentless. One rammed into their rear bumper, causing Anna to stir slightly in the back seat. "Anna?" Kate whispered, reaching for her sister's hand. Anna's eyes fluttered open, her gaze unfocused. "Kate?" she murmured weakly. Tears streamed down Kate's face. "I'm here, Anna. I've got you." Ben veered onto a secluded road, losing their pursuers in the darkness. The car skidded to a stop, the three of them breathing heavily. For the first time in months, Kate allowed herself a flicker of hope. Anna was alive, but the fight wasn't over. The safe house was quiet, tucked away in the outskirts of Chicago, where the towering skyline was replaced by rows of silent warehouses. Kate and Ben had driven all night to reach it, their nerves frayed from the chase. Inside, the air was stale, the bare walls offering no comfort. Anna lay unconscious on a thin mattress in the corner, her breathing shallow but steady. Kate knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her sister's pale face. "She's alive," Kate whispered, though the words felt hollow. Ben paced the room, his phone in hand. "The files we grabbed are encrypted. It'll take time to crack them." "Time is something we don't have," Kate snapped, her voice trembling. "They're coming. You saw how far they were willing to go to stop us." Ben sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Then we fight back. We expose everything." Kate's eyes darted to Anna. What about her? What if they were right? What if we damaged her mind when we unplugged that machine? Ben crouched beside Kate, his tone softening. "We'll figure it out, but if we don't stop Eterna Labs now, Anna won't be the last victim." The files they had stolen were their only hope. Ben worked tirelessly at his laptop, bypassing firewalls and decryption codes. The hours stretched on, the weight of exhaustion bearing down on them. Kate stayed by Anna's side, clutching her sister's hand as though her grip alone could anchor her to reality. Then, just before dawn, Ben's voice broke the silence. "Got it," he said, his eyes fixed on the screen. Kate rushed to his side, her heart pounding. The decrypted files revealed the full extent of Eterna Labs' operations. Names, locations, and details of the penance protocols were laid bare. "They've been running these experiments for over a decade," Ben said, scrolling through the records. "Memory erasure, psychological conditioning, even personality reconstruction. It's all here." Kate's stomach churned as she spotted Anna's name among the files. The records described her as a high-potential subject, someone with strong cognitive resilience but persistent emotional instability. The notes detailed how they had targeted Anna, manipulated her vulnerability, and used her as a test case for a new phase of the protocol. "They're monsters," Kate whispered, her fists clenched. Before she could process it further, Anna stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a moment Kate thought she saw recognition in her sister's gaze. "Anna?" Kate said, her voice trembling. Anna's lips parted, but the words that came out weren't what Kate expected. "Who are you?" Kate felt her heart break. "It's me, Kate, your sister." Anna frowned, confusion clouding her expression. I don't know you." Ben stepped forward, his tone gentle. "It's the memory wipes. They weren't complete, but they're scrambled. We can help her." Before they could say more, a loud crash shattered the fragile moment. The front door splintered open, and armed operatives poured into the room. "Get down!" Ben shouted, flipping the table to create a makeshift barricade. Kate grabbed Anna, shielding her as bullets tore through the air. The operatives were relentless, their movements coordinated and efficient. "We can't hold them off," Kate yelled. Ben tossed her a small flash drive. "Take this. It's all the evidence. Run, Kate. Get Anna out of here." "What about you?" Kate cried. Ben's eyes were resolute. "I'll buy you time." Kate hesitated, but another burst of gunfire forced her hand. She grabbed Anna, who was too weak to protest, and bolted for the back exit. The alley behind the safe house was dark and narrow. Kate's heart pounded as she half-carried, half-dragged Anna toward a waiting car they had stashed for emergencies. Behind them, the sound of gunfire continued. Kate's mind raced with guilt and fear, but she forced herself to focus. Ben had made his choice, and she had to honor it. She shoved Anna into the passenger seat and slid into the driver's seat, fumbling with the keys. The engine roared to life, just as the operatives spilled into the alley. "Go!" Anna croaked weakly. Kate slammed her foot on the gas, the car screeching forward. Bullets ricocheted off the metal frame as they sped into the night. The city blurred around them. But Kate didn't slow down. She glanced at Anna, whose head rested against the window, her face pale but calm. "We're safe for now," Kate whispered, though she wasn't sure if she believed it. Hours later, they reached a secluded motel far from the city. Kate parked the car and sat in silence for a moment, her hands gripping the steering wheel. "Ben," she murmured, tears streaming down her face. She turned to Anna, who was staring at her with a mixture of fear and confusion. "Who's Ben?" Anna asked. Kate's heart ached, but she forced a small smile. "Someone who saved us." Inside the motel, Kate plugged the flash drive into her laptop. The files were all there, a damning testament to Eterna Labs' crimes. She knew she had to release them to the public, but the cost weighed heavily on her. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. A message appeared on the screen. "You can't hide forever. Penance isn't done." Kate stared at the message, her fear giving way to resolve. "They won't stop," she muttered, "but neither will I." The fallout from the raid on the safe house was immediate and devastating. News reports the next morning described a violent confrontation that left one journalist dead and multiple suspects at large. Kate stared at the television in the motel room, the image of Ben's face on the screen making her stomach churn. The headline read, "Journalist killed in shootout tied to domestic terror plot." Kate clenched her fists. "They're spinning this against us," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "They're painting Ben as the villain." Anna sat silently on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Though her memory was fragmented, she could sense Kate's anguish. What's happening?" she asked hesitantly. Kate turned to her sister, her heart aching. "Ben's gone," she said softly. "He gave his life to protect us." The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the television. Kate knew she couldn't stay there long. Eterna Labs was undoubtedly tracking her, and every minute in one place put her and Anna at greater risk. Despite the overwhelming grief and exhaustion, Kate focused on her next move. The flash drive Ben had given her was the key to exposing Eterna Labs, but the files were dense and highly technical. She needed help deciphering them. That night, Kate contacted a trusted figure in the journalism world, Julia Hart, a seasoned investigative reporter known for her exposés on corporate corruption. Julia was reluctant at first. The story sounded too far-fetched, too dangerous, but Kate's desperation and the evidence she shared convinced her to meet. They rendezvoused at a diner just outside Milwaukee, where Kate laid everything out: the experiments, the missing people, the penance protocols, and Anna's involvement. Julia's expression grew darker with every word. "This is bigger than anything I've ever covered," Julia said, leaning back in her seat. "If what you're saying is true, this could bring down powerful people, but it'll put a target on your back, and mine." "I already have a target on my back," Kate replied. "I'm not asking for protection, I'm asking for justice." Julia nodded. "I'll help you, but we need to move carefully. These kinds of organizations don't just crumble, they fight back." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Julia and her team worked around the clock to verify the information on the flash drive, cross-referencing names and locations with public records. Kate provided them with every detail she remembered, while Anna, though still disoriented, managed to recall fragmented pieces of her time at Eterna Labs. "They took us to a white room," Anna murmured one night as Kate sat by her side. "It smelled like chemicals. There were voices, machines. What did they do to you?" Kate asked gently. Anna shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know. It's like pieces of me are missing." Kate squeezed her hand, her resolve hardening. "We'll make them pay for what they did to you." As Julia's investigation progressed, they uncovered shocking details about Eterna Labs' influence. The company had deep ties to government officials, law enforcement, and major corporations. These connections explained why so many missing persons cases were ignored or dismissed, and why Eterna's operations remained hidden for so long. "They're not just a company," Julia said during one late-night strategy session. "They're an empire." Kate felt the weight of those words. Taking down Eterna Labs wouldn't just require exposing their crimes, it would mean dismantling an entire network of corruption. Finally, after days of preparation, Julia's team published the story. The headline blared across news outlets nationwide. "Eterna Labs exposed: secret experiments on human minds." The article detailed the company's illegal experiments, complete with testimonies from survivors and leaked documents from the flash drive. Photos of the makeshift cells and the eerie symbols scrawled on the walls of the warehouse added a haunting visual element. The public reaction was explosive. Protests erupted outside Eterna Labs headquarters, and social media buzzed with outrage. Yet, as the initial shockwave spread, the backlash began. Eterna Labs denied everything, calling the story a fabrication orchestrated by rogue elements seeking to harm the company's reputation. Their lawyers issued a flood of cease and desist letters, and their PR machine worked overtime to discredit Julia's team. Kate watched it all unfold from a safe house Julia had arranged for her and Anna. Though the story was out, the fight was far from over. "Do you think this will be enough?" Kate asked Julia during one of their check-ins. Julia hesitated. "It's a start, but these things take time. They have money, power, and connections. They'll try to bury this." Kate's frustration boiled over. "They're still out there, erasing people like Anna, ruining lives. How can they just get away with it?" Julia placed a hand on Kate's shoulder. "They won't, but you need to be patient. We've dealt them a blow. They're vulnerable now. That's when they make mistakes." Meanwhile, Anna's recovery was slow. She struggled with nightmares and flashbacks, her sense of self fragmented. Kate stayed by her side, determined to help her rebuild. One night, as they sat together in the dimly lit room, Anna turned to Kate. "Do you think I'll ever remember who I was?" Kate hesitated, her throat tightening. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'll be here for you, no matter what." As days turned to weeks, Kate realized that exposing Eterna Labs was just one battle in a much larger war. The fight wasn't over, but she wasn't the same person she had been. She was stronger, more determined, and she wouldn't stop until justice was served. Kate Mitchell stared out the window of the small cabin that now served as a safe haven for her and Anna. The dense Wisconsin woods surrounded them, offering a natural barrier of isolation. For the first time in months, the chaos seemed distant, but peace was deceptive, a fragile illusion that threatened to shatter with the smallest crack. Anna sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the edges of a steaming mug of tea. Her once vibrant personality was muted, replaced by a quiet uncertainty. The trauma of what had happened to her, combined with the fragmented state of her memory, had left scars that ran deeper than Kate could see. "Do you think this is where we'll stay?" Anna asked one evening, her voice soft and tentative. Kate turned from the window, the weight of the question sinking into her chest. "For now," she replied, "until it's safe to move again." The truth was, Kate wasn't sure what safe meant anymore. Eterna Labs had lost a battle, but their reach was long. The leaked files had sparked outrage, but the justice system moved slowly, and Eterna's resources allowed them to spin the narrative in their favor. Despite the challenges, Kate refused to let despair consume her. Each day became a small victory, a chance to rebuild. She focused on helping Anna rediscover pieces of herself, whether through old photographs, childhood stories, or the small rituals of daily life. One afternoon, as they sifted through a box of mementos Kate had managed to salvage from their family home, Anna held up a faded photograph. It was of the two of them as children, arms slung around each other, their faces lit with carefree smiles. "I don't remember this," Anna said, her brow furrowed. Kate took a deep breath. "That was the summer we spent at the lake. You insisted on swimming every day, even when it rained." Anna laughed softly, a fleeting glimpse of the sister Kate had fought so hard to save. These moments of connection gave Kate hope, but they were often overshadowed by darker nights. Anna's nightmares were vivid and relentless, pulling her back to the sterile rooms and flashing lights of Eterna Labs. "They took something from me," Anna said during one sleepless night, her voice shaking. "I can feel the emptiness, like pieces of me are missing." Kate sat beside her, holding her hand. "We'll fill those pieces back in," she said, "no matter how long it takes." But Kate wasn't just focused on Anna's recovery. She was also determined to continue the fight against Eterna Labs. She stayed in contact with Julia Hart, who provided updates on the fallout from their expose. "The story is still circulating," Julia told her during one call. "But Eterna's legal team is relentless. They've managed to suppress a lot of the coverage." Kate clenched her jaw. "There has to be more we can do. We can't let them sweep this under the rug." "There might be," Julia said cautiously. "We've been hearing from other survivors, people who claim they've been through the penance protocols and want to come forward. If we can gather enough of them, it might be enough to turn the tide." Hearing this, Kate felt a flicker of determination reignite. She had spent so long trying to save Anna that she hadn't considered the other lives affected by Eterna's experiments. Over the next few weeks, Kate and Julia worked together to contact the survivors. Many were reluctant to speak, fearing retaliation or further trauma, but a few brave voices emerged, sharing harrowing stories that mirrored Anna's experience. One man, Caleb, described waking up in an unfamiliar city with no memory of who he was. Another woman, Marisol, recounted being stalked for months before she was abducted and subjected to memory wiping procedures. Hearing these accounts solidified Kate's resolve. She knew the fight against Eterna was far from over, but the growing network of survivors gave her a sense of purpose. At the same time, Kate struggled with her own guilt. Ben's death weighed heavily on her, and she often found herself replaying the events of that night, wondering if she could have done something differently. "He made his choice," Julia told her during one of their late-night conversations. "He knew the risks, and he believed in what you were fighting for. Don't let his sacrifice be in vain." Kate nodded, though the guilt never fully left her. As Anna's recovery continued, small victories began to accumulate. She started to remember fragments of her life before Eterna, like her favorite songs and the names of childhood friends. Though her past was still incomplete, the progress gave both sisters a sense of hope. One day, Anna surprised Kate by cooking breakfast, something she hadn't done since her rescue. As they sat at the table, the smell of pancakes filling the air, Anna looked at her sister and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Kate felt tears prick her eyes. "I never will," she promised. Though their lives had been irreparably changed, Kate and Anna began to find moments of normalcy amid the chaos. They knew the battle against Eterna Labs wasn't over, but for the first time, they allowed themselves to imagine a future that wasn't defined by fear. Kate Mitchell stared out the window of the small cabin that now served as a safe haven for her and Anna. The dense Wisconsin woods surrounded them, offering a natural barrier of isolation. For the first time in months, the chaos seemed distant. But peace was deceptive, a fragile illusion that threatened to shatter with the smallest crack. Anna sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the edges of a steaming mug of tea. Her once vibrant personality was muted, replaced by a quiet uncertainty. The trauma of what had happened to her, combined with the fragmented state of her memory, had left scars that ran deeper than Kate could see. "Do you think this is where we'll stay?" Anna asked one evening, her voice soft and tentative. Kate turned from the window, the weight of the question sinking into her chest. "For now," she replied, "until it's safe to move again." The truth was, Kate wasn't sure what safe meant anymore. Eterna Labs had lost a battle, but their reach was long. The leaked files had sparked outrage, but the justice system moved slowly, and Eterna's resources allowed them to spin the narrative in their favor. Despite the challenges, Kate refused to let despair consume her. Each day became a small victory, a chance to rebuild. She focused on helping Anna rediscover pieces of herself, whether through old photographs, childhood stories, or the small rituals of daily life. One afternoon, as they sifted through a box of mementos Kate had managed to salvage from their family home, Anna held up a faded photograph. It was of the two of them as children, arms slung around each other, their faces lit with carefree smiles. "I don't remember this," Anna said, her brow furrowed. Kate took a deep breath. "That was the summer we spent at the lake. You insisted on swimming every day, even when it rained." Anna laughed softly, a fleeting glimpse of the sister Kate had fought so hard to save. These moments of connection gave Kate hope, but they were often overshadowed by darker nights. Anna's nightmares were vivid and relentless, pulling her back to the sterile rooms and flashing lights of Eterna Labs. "They took something from me," Anna said during one sleepless night, her voice shaking. "I can feel the emptiness, like pieces of me are missing." Kate sat beside her, holding her hand. "We'll fill those pieces back in," she said, "no matter how long it takes." But Kate wasn't just focused on Anna's recovery. She was also determined to continue the fight against Eterna Labs. She stayed in contact with Julia Hart, who provided updates on the fallout from their exposé. "The story is still circulating," Julia told her during one call. "But Eterna's legal team is relentless. They've managed to suppress a lot of the coverage." Kate clenched her jaw. "There has to be more we can do. We can't let them sweep this under the rug." "There might be," Julia said cautiously. "We've been hearing from other survivors, people who claim they've been through the penance protocols and want to come forward. If we can gather enough of them, it might be enough to turn the tide." Hearing this, Kate felt a flicker of determination reignite. She had spent so long trying to save Anna that she hadn't considered the other lives affected by Eterna's experiments. Over the next few weeks, Kate and Julia worked together to contact the survivors. Many were reluctant to speak, fearing retaliation or further trauma. But a few brave voices emerged, sharing harrowing stories that mirrored Anna's experience. One man, Caleb, described waking up in an unfamiliar city with no memory of who he was. Another woman, Marisol, recounted being stalked for months before she was abducted and subjected to memory-wiping procedures. Hearing these accounts solidified Kate's resolve. She knew the fight against Eterna was far from over, but the growing network of survivors gave her a sense of purpose. At the same time, Kate struggled with her own guilt. Ben's death weighed heavily on her, and she often found herself replaying the events of that night, wondering if she could have done something differently. "He made his choice," Julia told her during one of their late-night conversations. "He knew the risks, and he believed in what you were fighting for. Don't let his sacrifice be in vain." Kate nodded, though the guilt never fully left her. As Anna's recovery continued, small victories began to accumulate. She started to remember fragments of her life before Eterna, like her favorite songs and the names of childhood friends. Though her past was still incomplete, the progress gave both sisters a sense of hope. One day, Anna surprised Kate by cooking breakfast, something she hadn't done since her rescue. As they sat at the table, the smell of pancakes filling the air, Anna looked at her sister and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Kate felt tears prick her eyes. "I never will," she promised. Though their lives had been irreparably changed, Kate and Anna began to find moments of normalcy amid the chaos. They knew the battle against Eterna Labs wasn't over, but for the first time, they allowed themselves to imagine a future that wasn't defined by fear. A year had passed since the night Kate and Anna escaped the clutches of Eterna Labs. The memories of that harrowing time still lingered like shadows on a sunny day. But life, though imperfect, had found a new rhythm. The small town in Wisconsin where they had settled was quiet and unassuming, far from the chaos that had consumed their lives in Chicago. Kate worked remotely, doing freelance consulting that allowed her to stay close to Anna. It wasn't the career she had envisioned, but it gave her the space and time she needed to focus on rebuilding. Anna's recovery was slow but steady. While many of her memories remained fragmented, she had started to reclaim pieces of her identity. She enrolled in art classes at the local community center, finding comfort in painting and sketching. Her work was often abstract, swirling patterns and jagged shapes that Kate couldn't help but associate with the symbols they had seen in the warehouse. "Do you think they mean something?" Anna asked one evening as she showed Kate a new drawing. Kate studied the image, her stomach tightening. "Maybe," she said carefully, "but they don't define you." Despite their attempts to move forward, the fight against Eterna Labs was never far from Kate's mind. The initial expose had sparked outrage, but the media attention had waned over time. The company had leveraged its vast resources to discredit the story, labeling the survivors as unreliable and the evidence as fabricated. Julia Hart, however, refused to back down. She continued to investigate, determined to uncover more about Eterna's operations. Through her efforts, a small but growing coalition of survivors began to take shape. These individuals, emboldened by Kate's story, were willing to share their own experiences and demand accountability. Kate became a reluctant leader within this group, offering support and encouragement to those who were just beginning to confront their trauma. She spoke at virtual meetings, listened to survivors' stories, and worked tirelessly behind the scenes to organize their efforts. One evening, Kate received an unexpected email from Julia. The subject line read, "We found it." Her heart raced as she opened the message. It contained a single sentence and a set of coordinates. Julia's voice was calm but resolute when Kate called her. "We've identified another facility," she explained. "It's hidden deep in the Rockies, but it's active. If we can expose it, this could be the breakthrough we need." Kate's mind swirled with possibilities. After everything she had been through, she had promised herself she wouldn't take risks again. Anna needed her, but this was more than a personal fight. It was about justice for everyone Eterna Labs had harmed. She hung up the phone and sat with Anna, explaining the situation. "You don't have to go," Anna said, her voice trembling. "We can stay here, keep rebuilding." Kate looked at her sister, the pain and resilience in her eyes. "If I don't go, they'll keep doing this to others. I have to see this through. For you, for Ben, for everyone." Anna nodded, though her hands trembled as she reached for Kate's. "Then come back. Promise me you'll come back. I promise," Kate said, though the words felt heavy. The operation to infiltrate the Rockies facility was meticulously planned. Julia's team, along with a few survivors who had military or technical expertise, worked together to map out every detail. Kate's role was to gather evidence and extract data from the facility's servers, a task she had learned from Ben. The journey to the mountains was grueling, the air thin and cold as they trekked toward the facility under the cover of night. The building was nestled into the cliffs, its modern exterior a stark contrast to the rugged landscape. Inside, the group moved with precision, disabling cameras and bypassing security systems. Kate's heart pounded as they reached the central server room, her fingers trembling as she plugged in the flash drive. The files she downloaded revealed horrors that surpassed even her darkest fears. Eterna Labs wasn't just erasing memories. They were creating new identities, molding people into operatives who could infiltrate governments and corporations undetected. The experiments were global, their reach extending far beyond what anyone had suspected. As Kate worked, alarms blared. The team had been discovered. Chaos erupted as security forces stormed the facility. Kate clutched the flash drive tightly, her breath ragged as she followed the others toward the exit. Gunfire echoed through the corridors and smoke filled the air. "Keep moving!" one of the team members shouted, pushing Kate forward. They burst into the open air, the freezing wind biting at their faces. Helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights sweeping across the mountainside. Kate stumbled but pressed on, her mind focused on one goal, getting the evidence to safety. Weeks later, the files were released to the public. The new revelations reignited the media firestorm, forcing governments and corporations to acknowledge Eterna Labs' crimes. The facility in the Rockies was shut down, and key figures within the organization were arrested. For Kate, the victory was bittersweet. The fight had cost her so much, her career, her sense of security, and the life she once knew. But it had also given her something she hadn't expected, a renewed sense of purpose. Back in Wisconsin, Anna greeted Kate with tears in her eyes. "You kept your promise," she said, pulling her sister into a tight embrace. Kate smiled, though the weight of the past lingered. "We're safe, for now," she said. As the two sisters sat together in their small cabin, Kate allowed herself a rare moment of peace. The fight against Eterna Labs wasn't over, but for the first time she felt like they had struck a real blow against the shadows. And in the quiet of that night, Kate made a silent vow. No matter what it took, she would ensure that Eterna Labs could never hurt anyone again.